There's actually a point that you come to in life where you have the experience, the fundamental experience of what you are in this body. And when that experience happens, everything that you are not literally comes in front of your eyes into full fruition for the first time. Like you're seeing these thoughts for the first time, these beliefs, these identities, these personalities that simply up until now you were operating as. But for the first time now, you have the foresight, the insight, the vision to be able to see them clearly as not you. And when this experience happens, literally it turns your entire life upside down. Like you have no idea what's happening, no idea what's going on, at least in the moment that it happens for you. Like even if you're watching this video, or even if you learn about it or hear about this process, when it actually happens, the same mind that learned or is trying to seek this experience or trying to grasp for it or seeking some kind of control, that mind also comes in front of you and is seen by you for the very first time as well. And so everything literally is purged from your system. And many people refer to this process as awakening, spiritual awakening, the return home, the return to presence, because that's really what it is. You go from operating in the identified state, right, as the identity, unknowingly, of course, right, because you don't know it until this transition happens, right? Until this transition begins, you have no idea that you have been operating, the person that you've been operating as is actually an imposter, is a fiction, is a character that has been created in your mind through your conditioning, through the very specific thoughts, experiences, environment, circumstances, every moment of your life. This person has been created from every moment in your life based off of fear. And that's what's so phenomenal about this experience, because this experience, we call it awakening because it literally frees you. It frees you of fear. It frees you of the psychological fear, right? The rooted fear that came from the initial way that you were conditioned in when you were a child, right? When you first identified with your body at 2 years old. And then at 4 years old, you became a certain kind of personality in order to please your parents. And then throughout life, right? Fear just kept on accumulating in the form of in the form of identity, right? So that first original identification that happened with the body created the first I, the first identity, the first I in the psychological mind. So the psychological sense of who we are, right? How we've come to know ourselves, our personality, right? So I'm not just talking about like, hi, I'm Zakia, I'm 37 years old, nice to meet you. Not that still is true, and can be true, and still, we function in the world this way. But what I'm referring to is the psychological sense of this person that creates this whole storyline in the mind. And every moment that we are awake, right, our mind is telling a story about everything that is happening in our life, in our environment, right? And the very keen way to perceive this or to understand this storytelling narrative is to understand, is to look at the thoughts, to sit with the thoughts. And when you do, you'll be able to see that they have a very distinct flavor, that the mind is telling the story, right? It's telling a story about everything, and the story is changing every moment, of course. But every story that it's telling, and every thought even, has a very distinct flavor. And when you can decipher this, right, the mind literally loses power. And the more you can decipher this, the more it loses power, the further it becomes, right? As in, the identity pulls further. So, and that's why this process is the most disorienting and, like delusional process, because you literally are coming out of the state of delusion. You are coming out of the state of identification. So one moment you're in the state of identification, the other moment you are in presence. And you don't get to decide when this happens. This transition is just happening back and forth every other moment. And so you just have to go through it, right? And during this process is very, very taxing. The most taxing process on your nervous system, the most taxing process on your body. And it lasts several years. It's not like any other experience or physical experience even that you've had. This process is out of your control, lasts several years. It could be 3 to 4 years, where this pendulum, right, is swinging back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And you just got to go through this experience. You're just experiencing this every moment, right? And so when this happens, there's a period of great rest, just fundamental rest, because there's nothing else literally that can occur during this time, because this process is just, it's brutal mentally, and of course it's just very extremely taxing physically. It's just extremely taxing on the body, because the body had become used to operating in a certain way, right? And now it's like letting go of this energy, right? Energy in the form of old identities, in the form of belief, in the form of fear. It's letting go the energy of fear. And so when it does that, right, because it was acclimated to being in the fearful state, to living in the identity state, right, for so long, even decades up until now, right? Understandably, this transition of just 3 to 4 years, like you're working through decades, or at least many more years than the 3 to 4 years that you spend in this transition, right? So it's quite understandable that it's going to take some time. It's going to take a period of acclimation for the body to, like, get used to, living without fear. And it's going to keep trying to grip onto the fear too, right? It's going to keep trying to go back to the old way. And that's quite normal, right? Out of our safety, that's what the brain does. That's what the mind does. Like, the mind's one job really is just to protect us. And so it's always seeking safety. Like, every moment it's just seeking safety. And that's exactly what the story is about, right? The story that's being told every moment about everything that's going on in our life, right? That is the ultimate coping mechanism, because it's literally just trying to keep you safe, and safe in the ways that you have been conditioned to fear, to believe in fear all throughout your life. So this is really the brilliance of the mind, right? That it can do this, that its one job is really just soul survival. That's it. And so when it does this, right, you don't actually realize this, right? It's doing this your entire life. But now when it does this, right, even though you get caught in the delusion, a moment later you snap out of it, and you keep seeing that it's doing this over and over and over again. And many people ask, like, oh my gosh, once I have the experience, right, the fundamental experience of what I am in this body, why do I have to go through this process of, like, this pendulum swinging back and forth? And of course there's many theories about this, right? But one of them particularly, and one that I believe myself, and I think I came up with this, I don't know if it's a theory of somebody else's, but one of them is that literally when you work through the way in which you learn to feel safe in your life, this very arduous transition of 3 to 4 years, right? It's the most sacred, also the most brutal, most terrifying. We call it the process of free falling, because literally you are going without the psychological safety that you have been operating as, and the place that you've been operating from, the decision, the criteria for the decisions that you were making for so long in your life, right? So everything is like all jumbled up here. Like, there's no sense of safety. Like, literally your experience every other moment when your pendulum is swinging from ego, right, from the identity to now presence, right? In this moment of presence, you don't have any safety. So it's quite understandable, right, that of course the mind is going to go and try to grip it back. And this happens in a very concentrated period of like 3 to 4 years or several years, however long it can happen for somebody. But it's so brilliant that it does this, because this process actually helps you understand, and not understand as in like the story that's, being told every moment, that same voice that's trying to understand. No, you're going to understand in a deeper way, in a deeper form, and that understanding comes in, like, in like the form of knowing. And it's quite interesting that until you experience this, right, you then start to be able to compare, like, oh my gosh, the part of me that was gripping, right, and trying to understand things that happened before in my life, you can actually see how that part really is your identity. It's your personal identity. It's your ego. It's your mind, right? It's another personality that developed in the mind that's like trying to understand. But the ways in which it was trying to understand everything is, again, rooted in its very uniquely conditioned fear. And this is phenomenal when you can understand this. Truly, truly, like it's phenomenal, especially for many of us who are intellectuals, right? We have gone in the direction, in our life of learning and seeking knowledge and understanding, right? And then you start to realize, oh my gosh, so much of that understanding, at least the psychological voice that would play here and would try to understand, so much of that was just it was my identity. It wasn't actually true to me. So when this process happens, you actually get to understand your ego, right? Your conditioning, your childhood trauma, your pain, very significant pain, and insecurities. Everything will literally arise to the surface, and you get to have a very deep and profound understanding of it that isn't even accessible through this personal mind. It's a universal intelligence. It's consciousness, right? And it's the same intelligence that comes out when we speak, right? When we speak about something, we're not actually like rehearsing what we're going to say. When we speak organically, this is the knowledge that flows, but it's in a very different form. It's actually, I don't actually know what I know. And so this process is so fundamental in healing and in returning to our childlike nature that was truly free. Because when we do this, right, and the more and more we do this, the more and more we come into our power. It's like my brilliance, right, my authority, my confidence was somehow masked under this identity, under this fear, my entire life up until now. And when this process happens, because so much of that fear begins to dissolve, the more and more it dissolves, the more and more this brilliance is allowed to shine and come forth. And almost the overlay, right? Or like we can say again, the mind storyteller, right? Which is literally like an overlay, right? It's like an overlay onto reality, right? Because it disappears so much, right? And so much of that overlay was about our brilliance. It was about criticizing who we are, right? It was in the form of self-doubt and just very, very harsh voices. And I know some of you that are listening to this, you know very well what I'm speaking about. The mind can be phenomenally cruel. But again, it's all seen from the place of conditioning. Like the mind has just picked up these things somewhere along the way, right? From people, from family, from your environment, from what it hears in a video or what it reads in a book, just a way, it just picks it up and then it just like regurgitates it. And we identify with that thought. And the important thing to remember is that thought is really just an energy. It's an energy in the body. And that thought in which it appears in is literally the play of our own unique conditioning. So that thought that it plays in, right? So it says, if it says you're a piece of beep, right? That thought is some way that I identify with my mind, right? But really underneath that thought, and what that thought is made of is really an energy. And so when you do this work, right, when we go through the process of awakening, what happens is we heal this energy that is at this energy of fear, right? And it's this energy that is at the root of identity, is at also the root of every thought. Like thoughts that arise, you can actually look at them and feel that they have a certain kind of energy. They have an energetic accompaniment, right? There's an energy that accompanies every single thought, every single personal thought, and you'll actually be able to feel them. And that's an extremely powerful component of the awakening process, right? Of the healing process. It's really feeling that energy, because it's that fear that hasn't been felt all our life up until now. And that's why this is coming up now, because when this happens, right, if this should happen in your life, it means that you are ready. You may not have been ready a moment before it happens. And when it happens, it's so profound, because we say, right, that there comes a point in our life when we become strong enough to kind of go back and save our younger self. And so that 4-year-old version of you, right, or even that baby version of you, right, that couldn't speak but still sense, like you can sense there was pain, you can sense trauma, like in your body, even as a baby. And I know that many of you listening, you know, this resonates with you. Like you came into this life and you feel like, you know, there was, like you felt like constrained and chained right from the beginning. You felt like there was, like you felt like you never were actually free. And so when you go through this process, for many of you, it will be the first time that you've ever experienced like freedom in your being, and you only know this experience through, like in hindsight, right? So because the more and more you come into this freedom, the more and more you'll see, oh my gosh, like there's just a feeling of relaxation here. And before, if I compare this to what I was experiencing before, there was just a lot of restlessness and anxiety. And now it's like almost in that place, there's a calm. And you know, life is so beautiful that even when we were in the identified state, even when we were in the constant state of anxiety, right, where our nervous system literally, like, it was shut off, like in an effort to protect us, it literally just stopped, like picking up cues and warning signals, right? It stopped performing its job, its duty almost, right? And so to go from, you know, to that kind of bondage, right? And actually to be in that bondage, right? And to not even know it is the ultimate gift of life. It truly is. It is the evidence of unconditional love. That utter perfect blindness. Because if we had known all along that we, you know, that wasn't the truth of who we are, then this suffering, right, this sort of like seeking would have begun a lot sooner, right? But life sort of gives us this time, and that time in our life, it's the play of conditioning to kind of experience that person, that personality, that identity, and their way of life. And even that period of time is so fundamental, because literally in life, it's this contrast. It's the contrast that is everything, right? And so when you awaken and you experience freedom, it's only the contrast of having the perspective and the experience of who you used to be, that old identity, that you can now realize, oh my gosh, this is freedom. Like I am free. And truly, like, you know, without contrast, like everything in life really must be in polarity. Like it has to be, otherwise we would never, of course there would never be any kind of appreciation, right? But we would just never know. We would never know. We would just never know. Like we would never know. We would never know what something is. Like in itself, like everything exists in comparison to something else. Every concept exists to its opposite. And so like life would be nothing without polarity. Literally, there would be no life, there would be no experience. Truly. And so you know, to live in this body and to awaken to the truth, right? And to have the experience of the ultimate truth in this body, which then the ultimate truth, as in like the irreducible forceless force that we are in this body. And many people experience this, I think, you know, when they have near-death experiences, and but many people just experience this from, you know, just out of suffering, or just for one reason or another, or for no reason. It just happens. It can just happen just like that. And suffering can certainly be a great catalyst for this, because suffering is known to bring ourselves closer to the truth. And you know, when the mind starts to get so noisy, that nothing else in life seems to be working, at a certain point it just releases. At a certain point, it's time, and the divine reveals itself in your body, right? In this form, you have the experience of what you are fundamentally before you entered this body, and what you continue to go on as even after this body dies. And we call that the ultimate truth. But even as a human being, when you think of like, okay, my truth as a human being, like the truth of me as in my authority, my power, right? Functioning in this body, not being under the spell of conditioning, delusion, identity, believing myself to be a thought or a belief or a personality or something about me, right? Not associating, not identifying, right? There's a difference. Associating can be, but identifying is like a strong belief that I am my mind, I am something, I am my body, I am my beauty, I am my education, I am my money. And we have to come out of this play in life. That's what this life is for. It's the coming out of this play. It's the experiencing of the identification, and then it's the experiencing the coming out of it, right? And the experience of the non-identified state. And you get to see, really, in the non-identified state, you get to see how powerful you are, just beyond anything that you imagined, right? Because when fear is not there, literally your brilliance, the magnitude of your power in every way in your life, the magnitude of that strength, right, is revealed to you, right? Because, and it's not like the fear just boop, overnight it's gone. You work through it, right? God always meets us halfway. The universe is always meeting us halfway. That's how this life works. That's the reality of life, right? You're never going to be handed anything. If you are, it's that original kiss from the divine. And then it just feels like, oh my gosh, after that experience, it just feels like you are handed everything, parallel to you also working for it. And that's the great paradox of life, because something in you knows, like, okay, this is not me. There's also something, there's another force here that's governing this, you know. And although like it just, there's an ease and a relaxation here that understands that still, right? Like, and even now, it's like almost like the effort that you put in now is different than the effort that you put in before, because although you're working and still meeting the universe halfway, right? It's like you're cruising on something. It's like your feet are somewhat on the water. It's like you're gliding on the water still, right? And there could be resistance, like there could be difficulty, there could be challenges, but it doesn't feel like anything. It doesn't feel anything like walking on land, like, you know, hiking and sweating and climbing, you know, because what has been built in here, your level of trust has fundamentally increased like tenfold, you know, even more. And you just have a trust in your being, you have a trust in life. And what's so secret about this process that you didn't even know all this time, right? That this trust even existed. You only experience it after you awaken, and you keep like deepening in this trust. And that's also like the secret of life, and the reality of life, right? Is that we never actually achieve anything. We're just constantly learning, constantly deepening into a deeper and deeper truth, deeper into our experience, into our human experience. And so that's what's so brilliant about all of this. The only thing really that's different is like that touch from the divine. It's like kind of like, you know, it's like scoops down and like, you know, picks you up. And that's the only difference. And you know, and now you're in the palm of the divine, but still walking, still experiencing life, still, you know, even struggling, still having challenges, but not struggling in that same way. You know, it's quite remarkable, right? This experience of awakening. And just remembering who you are. Every time you remember who you are, and again, this is like the importance of contrast, because so many of us, we find such difficulty in this process, and it's extremely, extremely difficult. It's the most difficult thing that we ever go through in life, truly. But especially, like, you know, in end stages, and it doesn't have to be in stages. Like, if you're listening to this, you can have this realization right now, that the contrast is necessary, that every moment that you experience a delusion, there's insight that is building here, trust that is building here, and adamance that is building here, right? To be here, to be present. And all of those components are necessary. Like, they're building you're building your inner strength, your inner conviction, right? Not the identity's conviction, but your true conviction for what you want, what you desire. It's like almost like you're purified. Your desire is purified. It's no longer psychological. It's not coming from your psychological wound anymore. It's like, yes, I actually do want to be here. I have such a love. It's coming from love. Your desire is coming from love. I have such a love for presence. I have such a love for being here. I have such a love for peace. I have such a love for my relationship. I have such a love for my partner. I have such a love for my family. I have such a love for people. I have such a love for children. That yes, in fact, I do want to do this work. That yes, in fact, I do want to be that human being. Yes, in fact, I do want to work on that part of myself, or look at this more closely, or serve humanity. It comes from a place of love, not from a place of need. And that's what awakening does. It frees you of yourself, your identified self that was wounded. And imagine that person who was wounded. Imagine when you're free of them, or the more and more you're free of them. Just imagine being free of them. And now operating from this place. Your eyes are so much clearer because you're not looking through the lens of your own wound, your own conditioning that you've accumulated your entire life. And so when you're not looking through your very subjective, very specific, very unique conditioning, you're able to see and experience reality in a whole new light, and in a way that is more closer, perhaps, to what is actually occurring, to what somebody actually might need, because you're not projecting your fear. You're not projecting your fear out of your psychological wound. And so we are able to serve more appropriately, and so we are able to serve better. And so to go through all of this, even to go through this entire process of 3 to 4 years where you're literally just a hermit, you're just hermiting inside, you're cocooning inside your bedroom, right? You're not speaking to anybody else. You're just with yourself 24/7. All of it really becomes worth it, because what you gain from this process is not like anything that you achieve in your entire life, nor will it ever be. And once you go through this process of 3 to 4 years, you see that there's really no end to it. It doesn't mean, it just means that after 3 to 4 years, maybe you're not, or when the said period is done, maybe you're not cocooning anymore. But you're always deepening into this process, and life really becomes this. And it was this all along. We just have a special term for it because it was a period of our life. There was great discomfort and great fear, because here we are cocooning in our room, and it's something completely abnormal and different from what we know, right, about ourselves, or our past experience, our history, and then also what we know, like, to be like, what society does or what society encourages, right? Like, who's encouraging this? And so, of course, there's immense fear, right? So maybe that's why we refer to it as, my spiritual awakening. It was a time when, and I remember it as that way, right? I remember it because it was a time that was unlike any other in my life. It was a time that I was so unexpected for me, that I could never predict, I could never imagine, right? And now more and more, there's a sense of okayness, like, oh, okay, like, It was okay, actually, that I did nothing with my life for 3 to 4 years other than this, other than be with myself and look at my thoughts. It was actually okay. There's an okayness here because you realize, oh my gosh, even when other people speak and oppose this, right, in front of my face, right, directly to me, there's still an okayness here because you understand, okay, like that's just coming from fear, from their fear. And having gone through this experience, you already know, like I've worked through that fear thousands of times myself, millions of times, like every day, every moment. What am I doing? What the heck am I doing? What the hell am I doing? Right? What am I doing with my life? When am I going to start working? Like, what am I going to earn? You know? What is my mom going to think? What is my family going to think? What is my mother-in-law going to think? What is my partner? Like, my partner, hates me for this. Like, you're working through that fear all the time. And that's the fear, literally, that you've got to work through. That's why you're going through this process. That's why you're cocooning. That's why you're doing this, out of the ordinary, completely abnormal thing with your life. Because it's precisely that fear that you've got to work through and that you're working through. And so give yourself the full admission, the permission, the perfection of being exactly where you are. Because this time and this contrast is so fundamentally needed. You need to experience this time of slowing down because everybody has told you so far, everything that you've learned is that you shouldn't slow down, is that you should be constantly filling your time and energy with all sorts of activities and tasks. But the one thing no one ever tells you is to freaking look at your mind, is to be with your mind. And maybe there's even restrictions around that. Like, okay, spend 30 minutes meditating. Don't do it for 3 hours a day. Don't do it for 6 hours a day. Are you out of your mind? Yes, I am. I actually am. And this period in our life, most of the times when this happens to us, we don't even know it's happening, right? Like something guides us. You probably won't even watch this video. It's probably already happened for you. Or, the person who needs to kind of be guided through it without knowing about it, it will happen exactly that way for them, right? And so, and that's the way it happened for me. Like I had no idea what this was. And there was something in me that really needed to build this trust of not knowing what I was doing with my life. Literally every moment I didn't know what I was doing. And even like the 365th day that I ended up meditating for 3 to 6 hours on the balcony, I still woke up that morning of that 365th day and still had no idea whether I was going to meditate, right? I didn't know what I was going to do. That's just how my life played out in every moment. Like even as I'm sitting outside, right? And I'd been doing this for 3 to 6 hours a day, like every day for that first year, meditating up to 6 hours a day, right? Even that first year, despite having done this those 364 days before, still on the 365th day, there's the thoughts that arise. How much longer, right? After the first hour that I'm there. Every moment, right? Every moment is like that. Whenever it decides to pop up, how much longer am I going to sit out here? Is it going to be 6 hours again? Am I going to leave now? Can I leave now? I should leave now, right? So it's like we are like this thing literally has to play out. Your mind has to play out. And you've literally got to come out of it in order to be your authentic self, in order to be the best version of yourself. You have to come out of it. And that's exactly what this process of awakening is. It's coming out of your mind, your deluded state, your conditioned state, your conditioned mind. And then when you come out of it, the more and more you come out of it, you get to experience, oh my gosh, that actually was my conditioned mind, because now what I'm experiencing is my conscious mind. And my conscious mind doesn't have these thoughts. Those thoughts don't even arise here. And I'm speaking and things are just flowing and I'm washing the dishes and the dishes are just being washed. It's like there's no owner of the activity, right? Before there was a psychological claimant. There was a psychological identity that was owning, that was saying, oh, I'm doing the dishes now. Even that completely disappears. Like forget, the voice that says, that's speaking to somebody else is like, yeah, I did the dishes today. Like, did you do anything? Forget that. Even this even much more subtle overlay as I'm doing the dishes, right? And I'm not, I don't need to have let's say there's nobody else in my life, right? But I'm just standing at this thing doing the dishes and something goes, oh, I'm doing the dishes now, right? It has like an energetic component to it. And all of it is just based in fear. it's like this sense of fear, like, and that's what the ego is. It's a sense of fear. It's a sense of compensation of some sort. And you can always feel that. You can always understand that by looking at the thoughts and by feeling them. And you'll know exactly when it's appropriate to feel or when it's appropriate to look and just see clearly for what it is, right? Through understanding, right? And these two things will become your ultimate powers, right? Understanding and compassion, the compassion that you gain from feeling, right? Because now you're going to be able to feel in such depths, in such ways that you never were able to experience before. And from that feeling, you're going to develop tremendous compassion for yourself, right? For your inner child, for your younger self, for yourself as a human being. Like literally this whole time you were saying, I'm a piece of beep. And now you have such tremendous, it's the complete opposite. You have tremendous compassion for yourself. You're not hard on yourself anymore, right? If there is, a hardness, it arises in a form of thought, right? And then it just passes. You don't believe in it. You know you're not that. Who you are is just a joyous, kind. You're kind to yourself, right? You're kind to other people. You're gracious with yourself. You're gracious with other people. It's like love has been restored in you, and this love was here all the while, but it was just covered up by the energy of fear. And that's this play of life. It's coming out of this fear, coming out of your mind. And when we do this, and the more and more we do this, life, it truly becomes sublime. We step into a power that we've never known. We step into a position and positions that we never imagined for ourselves, like even in society, even in the world. It's truly, truly like it is the mark of the divine, right? This process is the mark of the divine, because literally the divine shows himself, reveals himself to you as you. And you're like, oh my God, right? As you, as in now you know, like, okay, I'm pure consciousness. I'm also divine, right? But I'm also like the conscious presence, and my identity, all my identities, right? And my core identity, like we can just group them all together. My identity leaves my body. And so I'm just the presence. I'm just the here-ness. You know, I still know who I am. I still have memory, but it's not arising in the psychological memory form, right? The memories that my psychological identity would hold on to. I can still remember things, right, through conversations and stuff like that, right? But my mind, I'm not experiencing it in the same way that I was before. There's less observable mental experience. The body is just more cleaner. And so if you're on this journey, I really wish you the best, and I hope this video was helpful to you. You know, this journey completely changed my life, and the person that you're meeting right now, the way that I'm speaking, the way that I articulate myself, you know, I definitely wasn't, I was pretty good 3-4 years ago before this process started, but now I'm just unstoppable. And I know you are too. If I am, then every single human being is. We literally experience that in this body. I love you so much. I wish you the best. Go be you. This path is for you. Take it and just stay steadfast on it and go all the way through. You will make it to the other end and you won't even recognize yourself. And that's what this is for. I love you so much. God bless.